Welcome to Psychologist Talks. This is going to be part 2 in a series titled A Journey into Self-Destruction. In part 1, we took on an important macro topic that exists across any society, and that's politics, only particularly the 2024 election and Trump, which is, I know, quite controversial. Now, these subsequent episodes are not going to be, I would hope, quite as controversial because we're going to talk about macro concepts that are applicable to all human beings. But do note, I just said that politics is something that we're all subject to, whether we like it or not. But I digress. So today is going to be all about self-protectionism. And I want to start biological first and just name that there is something very normal and natural about this. And every series I do this. Every part of the series you're going to hear me do this is like normalize and say, what is the normal range? What is okay, allowable, understood? However, how have we gone too far? So I want to start first and foremost with the biological, but then very quickly get into how we form relationships, by proxy how we form societies, and kind of the geopolitical, socio-political atmosphere and these ebbs and flows that we have with self-protectionism. But at the end of the day, my notion is that we are doubling down so heavy into self-protectionism, it is now becoming a self-destructive choice. But again, let's start with the sensible, the biological that we all have. I think, it's very much more common knowledge these days, this idea of a fight or flight response. And the reason that we have this is to protect ourselves and by proxy, really our inner circle, our loved ones, our children, our pets, things that are very, very close to us. And we need that. But it is always first and foremost, I should note, it's going to be me first. If something is coming at me, I have a natural instinct to preserve my own life, and everything else washes away. It's a really important primal instinct, whether it is I'm gonna, turn around and run, the flight response, or the fight response. I need to fight at all costs to survive. What's really interesting about the more altruistic humans in this world, and or the fact that we will protect people outside of ourselves, you have to kind of push a little bit against this primal notion that's like, okay, I got to do me first, and then I'll take care of somebody else. Now, one could technically argue there's still something survival about it if it is related to family, because that's the idea. You're protecting the next generation. So there's still something instinctual about that. But there are people in the helping profession, there are first responders who, indeed, there are aspects of glory to these positions, but they are still having to override this sort of primal nature to look at oneself first, one's own personal interest above others, and push past that and actually give more to other people. Now, do remember, we can overextend this. Self-protectionism is an important kind of yin to a yang, that if we are endlessly giving and we do not tend to ourselves, it can actually be quite damaging. And this is where you get those kind of adages of you have to love yourself to be able to love other people. And, even airplane safety, be sure to put on your mask before you put on the mask of others. And that is to protect against that kind of, overextension of giving to other people. These forces importantly counterbalance one another and again have biological, basic, fundamental survival origins. However, if we were slaves only to these fundamental biological origins, we would never really form, deeper relationships, and very importantly, we would not form societies. Self-protectionism, in a way, confines us to where we are. We do not access much change besides what is internally happening, and there is a lot of stagnation to be had in that. You think about just kind of, cliche as it might sound, like back in the day, the tribes meeting one another. There is great danger in that, and say, well, we can meet these other people and they might see something that they like, that they want from us. And what if they are not friendly? What if they aggressively take what we have? It is best for us never to venture out for the possible risk of losing something by connecting with someone else. And that self-protectionism would keep that tribe stagnant. And you see when nations remain disconnected, they do not grow. And so there is a natural and necessary risk to not engage in self-protectionism, to advance and to grow and actually form greater societies and nations, and in the present day, it ain't going well. It often does not stay going well, but a global, generally speaking, society. Obviously, a lot of people who cannot get along due to their own egos and lack of health and their own self-protectionism. But at the end of the day, that is the task. That is the task given to all of us. We are inherently made to be relational creatures. And we have to make these choices of like, no, I think I'm good. I'm going to stay back here versus I'm going to give even more. As we continue to advance, this ask becomes greater and greater and greater. And very naturally, I think people tire of giving so much and extending so much. They're like, can we just stay where we're at right now? I'm starting to feel uneasy or scared or afraid of this endless change and this endless, not watching out for myself, but watching out for other people. Now, it's very important to note most people are not going to be in tune enough with oneself to say, I am scared. They will rationalize all sorts of they will use all sorts of other rationales to encourage and say that this self-protectionism is righteous. But as with all things in the world of righteousness, it is up to the eye of the beholder, because there are certainly times when a little bit of self-protection can go a long way, as there are certainly times when that self-protectionism can become detrimental. Let's look at just one-on-one relationships to really emphasize this point. When you talk about healthy intimacy with other people, it requires risk. It requires you, at the end of the day, to give up self-protectionism. You have to. If you do not, you will down pat. This is non-negotiable. You will not get to a more intimate relationship. That vulnerability is required to deepen a connection with another human being. And isn't it fascinating that it is that way? That every single human being encounters this dilemma of how much risk do I want to take in the service of producing, ideally, a more close relationship. And, we can loop right back around, and that's what creates strong societies, is like that bond, the brotherhood, so to speak, when you take those risks, tends to be tenfold than when you do not take those risks. It is just a fascinating facet of human nature that we cannot avoid. I don't care who you are. Even the psychopaths of the world have to figure out how to navigate this, even if we're talking the true blue scary ones are very relationally not compelled. They have to reckon with this sort of like, I have to take risks. I have to, put myself out there and find ways to connect to get my needs met. Now, obviously, that's not the healthy version of it, but I'm just saying, even if we don't want to participate, we are bound to participate whether we like it or not. So the challenge, though, so you might say, okay, all right, so that's universal. So how do I differentiate between healthy self-protectionism versus something that could be very self-destructive? And I'll kind of keep it simple. My general notion is the purpose of self-protection is temporary. It is best engaged when there is a knowledge that it will end and it is supposed to end. It is a temporary measure to get you back to a more workable space. That's the idea, right? It's not like I'm going to run from the saber-toothed tiger and then I'm never going to go out again. I'm going to run so I can survive and I can get back down to business and the things that I have to do. There is this kind of, I'm getting this spidey sense from this other person. I'm going to engage in some self-protectionism right now because it's not worth the risk in this moment, and I need to protect myself as I feel this out. But it is not me closing the door on that forever. It is me eyeballing and making sure that I'm okay while I assess the situation. We raise our shield and we raise our sword, but it's not a war that we will fight forever. We raise it to make sure we are not shot by an arrow or stabbed ourselves. But then when we realize it's not the case, we need to put the shield and sword down, or at least put the sword down and just have the shield on our back in case we need to pull it out again. I mean, again, we're not trying to be stupid here. Unexpected things happen. People can betray you. Indeed, indeed, indeed. But you cannot constantly have the shield up. You can see nothing with a shield in front of your face. You must take the risk and not protect yourself. You have to go out there and risk harm. There is no other path. So, when you look at the self-protectionism when I look at the self-protectionism that seems to be going on right now, there is this sort of perseverance, is that the right word? Perseverance on self-protectionism. It is not a temporary thing. You see people kind of going into their corners and saying, I'm good here. And no matter how the world changes around them, they do not budge. They say, nah, I'm going to do me. I'm going to care about my feelings, my personal economy, the people who can help me in my inner circle. And if they cannot help me and they are not beneficial to my inner circle, then I do not need them, nor do I want them. That is pure, raw self-protectionism. And it is self-protectionism that seems to be lasting years. We're not talking a few months. We're not talking, a year of self-protectionism. Yeah, it's just a really tough year. I don't trust people. I'm really wary. I'm really nervous. So I need that year to kind of recuperate. Sure. And this feels like for some people, this has been going on for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years of just, becoming increasingly entrenched in this. And one of the dangers of self-protectionism is it becomes its own self-fulfilling prophecy. We say this a lot about anxiety and fear because that's what, at the end of the day, self-protectionism is about. Is that when we constantly have the shield up, we constantly have the sword up, we begin to think like, well, maybe I didn't always need it, but maybe I needed it in this moment. And maybe I need it now. And what if I lower it and something bad happens? So I probably need to keep it up. And I'm glad I've kept it up because nothing's happened to me. And I'm safe here. Okay, I don't need to worry. This is working. I don't have to encounter something that's bad or terrible or whatever it might be. But what becomes the cognitive challenge is you're never disproving that you can put those things down and not be immediately hurt. And people just get lost in this. It becomes kind of second nature to them of like, well, of course I always have to be on guard. It's worked out for me, and because I've had a few things bad happen to me, then clearly the safest route here is just to have the swords up and the shields up. But it's an illusion. It is an overextension of something that's very natural. Yes, bad things happen. Yes, we need to be aware and capable and able to protect ourselves to some degree, but it cannot be a one-trick pony. And that is my fear, is that we're making it into a one-trick pony. We are entrenching ourselves in self-protectionism. And in doing so, it is a self-destructive choice. We are choosing stagnation. We are choosing disconnectedness. And in doing so, we jeopardize our ability to grow and adapt and change. We must confront self-protectionism to be able to get through this. All nations know this. You can try to avert world war, but self-protectionism, ironically enough, often promotes it. We can try to avoid the emotional pain of loss in seeking love or friendship, and yet we will never find love or friendship if we do not disengage in self-protectionism. There's no other path. There's no other path. The free markets demand it. To some degree, protectionism cannot last forever. So that's it for self-protectionism. A pretty short one, but I think a really critical one. I mean, this is primal beginning of humankind kind of stuff. This has been an ebb and a flow, a drive that exists in us for a reason, but a drive we have frequently, if not constantly, had to fight to advance and to continue to progress as people, as a society. And so for those of you who might be feeling a little bit more protectionistic right now, a little bit more in one's corner, note that you might be there for a reason. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. But ask yourself, when will I lay down this sword? When will I lay down this shield? When will I take a risk again to go back out there and connect once more in the service of seeking something greater than where we're at today? So, as always, thank folks for listening and watching, and stay curious.